Hello and welcome back to another Walking Dead video, and today my review for The Walking Dead Dead City Season 1, Maggie and Negan's first season of their new spin-off show. And wow, I'm shocked at the quality of this. With Walking Dead spin-offs, we've been very much used to them being mediocre to bad. However, with Dead City, it is not the case. This is a very strong first season and it's in the pocket, and I think what really helps this is that the plot is simple. Maggie and Negan are forced to team up to head to Manhattan to save Hershel, who's been abducted by someone from Negan's past called the Croat. It is very simple, and once they're in Manhattan, Manhattan really feels alive. It is only 6 episodes, and because it's such a short first season, there is no fluff. There's only maybe one episode which is kind of filler, however it is filler done right. I definitely hope going into season 2, it will not be a 16 episode season, and it will be a 6 to maybe 8, at most 10 episode season. I really hope we get 8 episodes in season 2. I think that would be a good episode count, because if they do any more than that, I feel like filler will come in. So because it's such a short season, we have great pacing, and it looks amazing the entire season. Mostly because a big chunk of episode 1 takes place outside of New York, but once they're in New York, it is amazing. It's so good to have a show not take place in the generic wilderness, because that's what the Walking Dead franchise does a lot of the time. You have some great episodes just because they have sets in cities or in an urban area, but a lot of the time it is rural area. It is the woods. It's the same set of woods over and over again. So big win for me is that this entire show looks amazing when they show it. One downside of this is because they're in the city, a lot of the time you're in the darkness, and this show is too dark way too many times for my liking. I feel like they couldn't have it always being daytime because of the budget, so they put it in these dark, cramped areas, and there's a reason why they're underground or in all these buildings a lot of the time at the night, so they can hide the budget and save it for these nice shots. I feel like they could have done more with Manhattan, but we always have a season 2 to flesh out Manhattan a little more. What we saw of Manhattan has this mystery, and it does feel alive, and it looks great when we do see it, but I feel like one too many times it is too dark for me to properly enjoy Negan and Maggie in Manhattan. All of the characters in this show are just amazing, and even the bonus characters, the new ones, I was a bit shocked how good they are, because they really flesh them out. You have 6 episodes, but they managed to keep the cast small and focus on the important characters, and you flesh out characters like Armstrong to the point where you're like flip-flopping if you like him or hate him, and by the end of the season you're like, okay, Armstrong, you're a solid character. The only issue with this is the survivors that Maggie and Negan mate, and we don't really flesh them out more, and by episode 5 they're all just gone. That's the only time characters were introduced just to be the death body count, and that's like the only point where I was like, okay, they're bad. The big characters, Maggie and Negan, I'm shocked how good they are, because going to this show, I was very worried because how they ended Maggie and Negan in The Walking Dead was perfect. They had a perfect ending to their character arcs by the end of that show, and this show had a lot to deal with, but I do like what they did. Generally, they did very good, especially with Negan. At times, it felt like they're just retelling Maggie's story from season 11 in this show, and it got to a point where even in the first episode Negan calls her out on it, so there is a bit of self-awareness that Maggie is stuck. However, Negan's moving on with his life, so it does kind of work. Hopefully it does make it worthwhile, and by the end of this show something else happens with the relationship. Maybe they learn to forgive each other and become friends, and not just have that acceptance at the end of season 11. That's the only way I can see this show worth bringing back Maggie and Negan. And while talking about this show, I definitely have to say it's too much about Negan. The entire plot revolves around Negan. Everything is about Negan. You have the Marshal hunting down Negan. You have the Dom and the Croat wanting Negan. You have Maggie wanting Negan. Everything is focused on Negan, and it leaves little to do for Maggie. And by the end of this season, you're like, okay, you got Maggie just being like, screw you, Hershel, I have you now, but I need to go to Negan so I can be in season 2. It seems like Maggie's story's done by the end of the season, and I'm very interested to see what they're going to do with Maggie in season 2, because how little she is factored into this entire plot, because how much it is the Negan show. It really feels like this was a show pitted to Jeffrey D. Morgan, be like, hey, we're going to continue Negan, he's one of the most popular characters on The Walking Dead, we're going to give you a spin-off. And then Lauren Cohen overheard the meeting and was like, I want to be there, I want to be in this show. And that's what it feels like happened. Lauren Cohen kind of pushed herself into the show because she does not feel like she could be in the show organically. And the writing is good, but it isn't good enough to have Maggie in the show. And the only time the writing is really bad is when it's about Maggie and trying to explain why she's relevant to the plot, and it's the most convoluted reason. So apparently the Crow had wants Negan, but doesn't bother to go look for Negan. He goes, finds out about the war, and hunts down Maggie and abducts Hershel so that Maggie will go and find Negan and bring him to Manhattan. Would it just been easier to go and get Negan if they're able to get off and on the island and find Maggie? Would it just been easier to find Negan? If Maggie can easily find Negan, the crowd would have done the same. And they treat it like it's such a big reveal, but you could see that coming from before the show came out, because it's the only way logically that Maggie would be involved into this plot. And I don't like how big the show makes it, and the only other time the writing is bad is when Negan talks about his backstory with the Crowhead, apparently one of Negan's original right-hand men. We never heard about him in The Walking Dead, and he was around during the war with the Kingdom, so Ezekiel probably could have met the Crowhead. Why did Ezekiel never mention him? And it just leaves a big plot hole in The Walking Dead, where Negan treats the Crowhead like he's the worst man he ever did because he killed kids. Simon murdered every male in Oceanside, and Negan knew about that, and that was fine for Simon to do that. It just really annoys me, these two bad cases of writing in a show otherwise very well written. It's just when they're trying to be smarter than they actually are and trying to make this plot bigger than it actually is, it falls down. They should have kept this as a simple plot. Maggie needs Negan's help to get Hershel back, and by the end, Negan's captured and Maggie just escapes with Hershel. That's what they should have done, and it would have been a better plot, I feel. Now let's move on to my one sentence / one word overall review. I have to say this is a fantastic season and a must watch, and I would give it a 8 out of 10. It was almost a 9. However, there are just a few small things here and there which really do let it down. It's an 8 out of 10. It's a fantastic first season, and I definitely think season 2 will be better. It's just, at points, little things just really kind of add up to hit the show down for me, like it being too dark at times. The writing trying to be more clever than it actually is when it should have just been a simple plot. This show was way too much about Negan than it being a Negan and Maggie show, and Thomas and the other survivors were really just cannon fodder for episode 5. But it's still 8 out of 10 and a great first season and a must watch. So if you haven't watched it yet, I recommend go and watch season 1 of Dead Sea. So please tell me down below in the comments, what did you love about season 1, what did you hate, and what would you rate it overall? So goodbye, peace out, and I'll see you in my next video. So make sure to like and subscribe to keep up to date with all things Walking Dead, and I'll see you later.